General Jake, you share that your main job in the Air Force as senior leaders was to bring up new leaders and refer to the military as sort of a young people's organization, which you had mentioned earlier. You had a mentality that was a no-fail mission. What are some of the first questions you ask about a young aspiring leader so they can understand their capabilities in taking on higher responsibilities?
Yeah, Danielle, I believe that as a leader of an organization, one of your main, if not the most important duty you have is to develop your people so that they can handle higher and higher levels of responsibility. Why? Mm-hmm. Maybe you need to open another branch. Maybe you need to actually get bigger, grow, hire more, rookie employees. Whatever the case is, you need to develop the leaders in your organization so that A, they already know the culture and your core values, but B, they really have a concept of team that is your concept, my concept. Mm-hmm. So as a leader, I want to make sure that the people we put in charge of task force or put in charge of a tiger team or a sales team, they lead with the core values that I think are important. So it was my main job. And we had, there were 29,000 people in 9th Air Force in my last position, but we needed the younger leaders to get the training, to get advanced degrees, to get the information and certification they needed to have. And we had to continually develop these leaders. And if we didn't do a good job at it, the organization would suffer.
Yeah.
And in the military, it is sometimes a no-fail business. If you have a leader who flames out or is not a good person, the whole organization could fail. And that could be a very important battle, or it could be a task that is something that has lethal force. But today's businesses need to do the same thing. They need to develop the leaders from within their organization.
What do you see? I mean, you kind of said lead by example earlier. It says what kind of leadership that you have. But when you're looking at a young professional like your son or your daughters, and you are then comparing them to maybe some other young professionals, you have a little bit of different view from your kids, but seeing other young professionals and you're saying, how kind of trying to get a gauge for who they are. What are those questions that you start out by asking them? I mean, do you get a feel for what they value as a person? You had mentioned what makes them tick. It sounds like that's one of the first questions that you ask.
Yeah, I would, and Beef will have many examples, but I oftentimes would ask them, are you doing something that you want to do? Are you involved? Is your job today what you want to be doing 5 years from now? Is it your passion?
Yeah.
Or is it something you're doing, but you want to move on to other things? What are your goals? So if you don't ask the young people, what do they want to be doing? They might think you don't care what they want. You just want them to go to work every day and do their job. So you first want to know what really is they're passionate about, where their goals and what they aspire to. And then if you can, you help them get there.
Yeah.
And if it's within your organization, that's all the better because you really can help them.
Yeah.
But if it's somewhere else, you try and work that into the plan over the next year or two. And that's why I say developing leaders takes a lot of my and your time if you're the main leader in that organization. But you need to really have them understand if they're staying here in this organization, it's the team and the mission and the real purpose of our company that matters.
Yeah.
Are you on board? And if they say, yes, I am, you go, let's get that advanced degree. Let's get an MBA. Let's go get the certifications that make you a better leader.
Yeah. Yeah. Did you have any comments on that?
Well, I was just going to say another way of looking at this for the listener is called succession plans.
Yep.
And I can't remember the percentage, but it's 30 to 40%, let's say, of companies in this country do not have succession plans. And
wow.
I can give you examples of major corporations that have had major problems because they didn't have someone ready to become the CEO, and they just picked the CFO, for example, and they end up failing because the CFO was a great financial guy, but was
And
terrible at
CEO.
running the country, the
Yeah.
company.
Yeah.
So what we do in the military is we can't talk to every young person. We talk to them in a group, but as far as the individual, we have boards and we have classes and we have courses and we have all
in
sorts
the military,
sure.
you mean?
We have all sorts of those structures that are grooming our second lieutenants all the way to general officers and helping to build them to the point of what Jake was talking about in terms of ensuring they're meeting the goals and objectives of the organization. And these are people that you want to get to the next level to be able to run the organization. So I would make it very simple. Succession plans are no different in the military than they are on the civilian side of the house.
Yeah, I would say for most of your listeners running small or medium-sized businesses, if you're the person on top of the org chart, your number one job is HR. Your number one job is to really hire the new people that you need and to really manage your senior leadership team and to really start to develop the younger people to be able to, like Beef said, to succeed by being the next, vice president. And that development plan is job one.
What about mentorship? I mean, you mentioned you have classes and courses in the military, and then you've mentioned in the business world, having that succession plan and making sure that you're planning for that. But how important is one-on-one coaching? Did you have that one-on-one coaching in the military?
Absolutely.
Yeah.
And, Jake and I both had that opportunity to bring young officers in and talk to them about their careers and where they wanted to be and what they thought their roles were and what they and how they felt about moving to the next level. So those conversations happened all the time, but you can't talk to 70,000 people and he couldn't talk to 29,000 people.
Yeah.
So that makes it a little more, you have to rely on your senior officers and your senior enlisted leaders to carry the water with regard to mentoring and ensuring that he sees the right people rising to the top.
Yeah. Yeah. You had shared a little bit about that too, General Jake, during our talk 2 weeks ago as well. And you also said something about the younger generation having a little bit of a work-life balance more so than what a traditional mindset is. So important to mentoring, really understanding the differences within the generations was important too. I mean, if you're building a business and you're trying to work with somebody who is maybe a mom who wants to work on her career but is in a different life stage than the person that's just coming out of college, it's really honing into where they're at and understanding what they want with work-life balance, because that can look different. Correct.
Yeah, and it takes some adjustment for your perspective. If you're as old as Beef and I are, when we grew up, there wasn't a lot of that discussion. There just wasn't.
Right.
And it maybe was more applicable to the young ladies, the women in the organization than it was to the men. But obviously, you do need to take that into account, that there are phases of life that you have to understand what people are trying to do in addition to their work. And I think for leaders of companies today, you really need to take a bit of quiet time and consider how you want your organization to run in terms of how people's personal desires and their needs are factored in. You can't say everything goes and you can't have it county option.
Yeah.
You have to have a template so that everybody is fairly treated. But your template can be flexible.
Yeah.
Especially if it's kind of written into your policies of your company. Write it down. See the reaction to it in draft. But if it really does hold true across the board from management to senior management, publish it and say that's our policy. This is how we do this. This is how we take time off.
Yeah. They're guidelines.
Yeah.
Like Pirates of the Caribbean says, right?
They're useful for any organization is guidelines. HR policy.
Yeah, absolutely. Okay, General Jake, I believe. Nope, General Beef. We've got a few more questions. We know that the military has to constantly be reviewing their operation and ways to be efficient and perform to be the best. This includes knowing when to remove someone from a position or have them court-martialed. In the business world, do you find this harder for business owners to accept when performance is lacking from an employee?
It shouldn't be harder. It's the same concept. If someone is not doing what they're supposed to be doing, you have to get rid of them. And that was the hardest thing to do. The first time was very difficult because I agonized over removing this individual.
Yeah.
But I had to come to the realization that I didn't cause it. The individual did.
Right.
And, the people around those individuals are waiting for you to do something because they realize that individual might be a cancer within the organization.
Mm-hmm.
And if you let it continue, you're going to manifest itself into something worse than the situation that exists at the moment. So it's incumbent upon you as a leader, whether it's in the military or in the civilian world, to get rid of that cancer as soon as possible. And realizing that you're not the problem. It was that individual that was not living to the ideals or the goals and objectives of the organization.
I learned this, and then I used to mentor the younger leaders in my organization with it, and it works pretty well. But I would say, don't spend 90% of your time on 10% of your people. You need to be quick on the problems that you have in your organization. If somebody's not performing well, don't agonize over it.
Yeah.
You've set the standards. You've got the things that the company needs to do. You've got your metrics and what you want to do. And if somebody's not measuring up, don't take a long time to straighten that out, because where you want to spend 90% of your time is on your good people.
Right.
You want to spend time developing and mentoring your good people in your organization.
Yeah.
And as soon as you think about it, how do you spend your time as a leader? And if you're always agonizing over something that's a firing issue, you're not effective because you're really not mentoring your good people. And that's what the team needs the most, is good people to develop.
Yeah. Yeah. I think that's a great point, and kind of reiterates what you were saying earlier, is seeking understanding. I mean, if you've already sought understanding about that person and everything that they've done for the organization, and then at some point they keep on not performing to the standards that you've already set, then it's not really your
Cut your
fault.
losses.
Yeah. It's time to let go, and you're probably doing them a favor by helping them move on and see where they've maybe made some mistakes. Okay, General Jake, when you were challenged to be out of your comfort zone and speak with representatives of another country, you said you saw it as an opportunity to learn something. What is something you learned that was a characteristic of most business leaders you meet? There's a few questions here, but we'll hit one at a time.
Yeah. When I'm out of my comfort zone, either one of two things has happened. I haven't done my homework, or I just need to be comfortable being uncomfortable. And as a leader, you sometimes just have to go into a meeting, a conference room, or an engagement, and just be uncomfortable. And the way to do that is try not to fidget, try not to ask or say anything that's inappropriate. Just be very good at listening, and just get through it. But if you didn't do your homework and you aren't prepared, and that's why you're uncomfortable, well, do your homework.
Yeah.
Learn about the person that you're meeting, or learn about the country that you're in, the cultures that they have, and don't make any faux pas. And so, we had to learn this, because we would get put into situations where I was definitely, not comfortable, but I had to work my way through it because it was what we needed to do to get our objectives met. So I don't know, Beef.
No, I think you nailed it. I mean, you just have to be prepared, and sometimes you're not as well prepared as you'd like to be. So you have to really be on your toes during those type situations, because you may have to be prepared to say something within that discussion, and you better have the ability to quickly think on your feet to be able to get through those.
I remember as commanders, we had to go around in Washington, D.C. We had to visit our congressional delegation from the base where we were. And I was never really that comfortable with it unless I knew the senator or the congressman. So I would prepare, and I would have like 2 things I was going to talk about. Not 22, but 2 things.
Right, just sticking to it.
And then I would stick to it, and
backups.
then I would listen to how they reacted. And if it was a short meeting, I was happy because I was uncomfortable. But the more I got used to it, the more it turned into wonderful conversations, because I just tried to keep it simple with my preparation.
And they always tended, they always tended to ask you, what are your 3 main objectives? How can I help you? What are the 3 things that I need to know to help you with your organization? So you better be able to articulate those.
Yeah.
So
prepared yourself for what you're going to be speaking about. Well, I was thinking you were going to talk about football, or, I don't know.
You would be wasting a valuable opportunity if all you talk about is the weather, the football, or the Florida Gators. I mean, that's not the purpose of the meeting, but it puts you in your comfort zone, but you're not getting anything accomplished.
Yeah.
So you really, why are you going to this meeting? What is the purpose of the meeting? And what do you need to walk out with as your objective? And then if you talk about football and whether the Gators are going to beat the Noles or not, I mean, that's after the fact. I don't, it doesn't matter.
But it just really sounds like you have both had to really understand where you're going, who you're talking to, and what's appropriate. So to your point, how to cross your legs and understanding the culture, that you're not just going to drive right into business versus this is a valuable opportunity, and you're going to be speaking with them, and you better be ready to answer for your 3 next objectives and how you're going to work together. They're completely different, but 2 different approaches, and being intentional and knowing when and what to speak about and who you're speaking to are very important.
Right. Be intentional and have a purpose. Be purposeful.
Be purposeful.
And if the end of the meeting is relaxed and comfortable, that's all the better.
Yeah. And you've made friends, right?
Yeah.
Hopefully. The second part to that question, how much research and preparation did you do before the meeting, which you just mentioned? And then the third part was, do you see local businesses prepare enough when they go to market with their product, or invest enough into preparing their staff to represent at meetings?
Yeah, it's why when I work with businesses, I really make sure, first, I understand what they're trying to do. And second, I understand what they want to be doing 5 years from now. And then I ask their workers if that's what they understand they're doing. And if it all matches up and the audio and the video match, then I go, well, how are you going to do it? What's your roadmap? What's your plan of action and milestones? And when it really comes together, it's really impressive. And I've talked to a lot of young business leaders that really have their homework done. They really have their act together. And it's really nothing I can do to help them other than, those are the questions that I ask.
Yeah. That's great. Okay, you both contributed to the book Leadership from 30,000 Feet, which you can buy on Amazon, by the way. And one of the main questions you asked...
$10.
$10. And that came out when? When was it published?
2.5 years ago.
And you're working on another one currently, correct?
Yeah, Leadership at 100 Feet.
And
so it's going to be, again, a flying oriented book, but this one's leadership kind of right down there in amongst all your workers and how we did it and what our experiences were. But Leadership from 30,000 Feet was about what we believe, Beef, myself, my brother, the 2 brothers that are also general officers, what 5 of us believed were the 5 characteristics of a leader. And I'm going to put Beef on the spot, but the 5 characteristics of a leader. And in the book, we tell 5 stories about each of those characteristics that we learned from our career experiences, people we worked for and with. And then the book is a book of short stories, really, in that regard. But Beef, test question.
Competence, commitment, courage, character, and compassion.
Confidence,
and
commitment.
I kind of characterize the first three that he said: competence, commitment, and courage as foundational. No leader can really be a leader if you're not competent at what you do, if you're not committed to the organization, if you're not brave and you're courageous in your, in what you're working to do. But the really good leaders, they care. They're compassionate. They really want to know how their workers are. And they care about their families.
Yeah.
And if your character is ever in question, if your integrity gets called into question, you're really not that good of a leader. So that character piece is where we really spent some good time thinking about the examples where we knew and worked for leaders of impeccable character.
And the last two get to your relationship piece.
Yeah.
Because now you really care about the people in your organization. And now you've really raised the bar of your organization that much higher, because now you have an understanding of the folks that you work with, and from a compassionate perspective.
Yeah. Yeah, we have 5 core values at Bank of Central Florida, and it's client focused, which is really being a servant, being entrepreneurial minded, so being curious, thinking outside of the box, peer-to-peer solutions, go and talk to somebody rather than email them, and work it out with them rather than trying to talk to other folks when you can just go talk directly to the person, work it out. Self-managed. So you're going to handle your own schedule and take ownership of what you're doing. And then we care, which is the last one. And if you ask our CEO, that is his most important. And I speak for so many others in the organization that caring is a deep part of our leadership team. And it is seen through the organization because of actions they do all the time. All the time. It's really neat, I think. I'm confident
if you
in that.
believe that your leadership cares about you, then you go that extra mile.
You do. Absolutely. And it says a lot. Even during COVID times, we had a lot of decisions that were made by leadership that showed that they cared more than how the business just was only going to operate. They were caring about how the families were going to handle it and how people were handling it mentally and working from home versus working at the office. And there were a lot of challenges, a lot of delicate conversations, but in the end, there were so many actions and words that they shared that showed everybody that they cared. And I see that as leadership, and definitely see what you're saying in that. So love speaking to the aspects that you have had, that you've shared today, the perspectives and some of the military experience that you've brought into the consulting side. But very, very much appreciate your service and your input today. Thank you very much. I do have one more question. If you could see somebody on this podcast, who would you pick to see? Anybody in the world? If you could hear somebody speak on the podcast specific to business or growth or leadership development, who would it be? And no, I did not give you this question ahead of time.
We had a chief of staff of the Air Force by the name of Mark Welsh, who was the most inspirational speaker I've ever heard.
Really?
And he was compassionate and he cared, and I just love hearing him talk. So
where's he at now?
He's in Texas, I believe. Isn't he?
I think he is, yeah. Beef and I both know this fella, and he is a wonderful leader. His name is Baba. He's a 4-star general. His name is Robin Rand. And if we could ever get him here to talk, Baba would entertain your listeners. He's a really inspirational leader and
Jake's.
And a really good friend.
Yeah, and where is he at now?
He's in Colorado, so it'd be expensive for you to foot the bill to get him here. But I'm trying to get him on a fishing trip here in another month or so. So if I can get him here, maybe Danielle, I'll introduce you to him, and you can have a podcast with Baba.
I would love that. We'll buy him lunch.
General Welsh, he spoke when he was a 1-star. He spoke to the cadets at the Air Force Academy, and it's an incredible speech. You can look it up online.
General Welsh.
Yeah, Mark Welsh.
Okay.
But one story he tells that I've incorporated into the relationship piece is when he was the head guy in Kunsan Air Base in Korea. He was an F-16 base. He was the wing commander, and he'd go out to fly all the time, like Jake. Jake liked to fly as a general officer, and but he wasn't a general then. He had been a colonel, right? Yeah, and he'd go out to fly all the time, and he usually had the same crew chief, the guy that kind of helps you get the airplane ready and get you in the seat, put your parachute on, that sort of thing. This guy was awesome. But he really never talked to him about his family or anything else. He just talked to him about the job. Well, he'd see him outside of his Air Force job, and he was a mess. He had earrings and gothic looking and boots, and just, you're thinking, this guy's a mess. Well, one day the first sergeant and his supervisor had him, and they were walking to his office. And Colonel Welsh at the time's thinking, oh no, what did this kid get himself into? Brings him in the office, and apparently his work ethic had started deteriorating, and these guys couldn't figure it out.
Really?
Well, they finally figured out what the problem was. He had been married, divorced. He had a 5-year-old kid, I believe it was, and the mother was a drug addict. And the court case for custody was coming up on a Monday. This was like on a Wednesday or Thursday. And he didn't talk to anybody because he was a young airman and was scared to, didn't think he was going to be able to get any help. And they finally brought him into to Colonel Welsh, and Colonel Welsh is thinking to himself, why didn't you two guys know? And why didn't I know about this?
Yeah.
Why didn't I talk to him about his family? That goes to the relationship piece.
Yeah.
If people would have known, then we could have fixed this earlier. So now Colonel Welsh had to make all these calls and coordinate for this kid to fly to Phoenix, Arizona on a Friday or Saturday to be there on Monday for this court case.
Wow.
So that really feeds into the relationship piece, is knowing your people and understanding
and caring,
and caring
enough to send him back and be able to do that and be a part of it.
I mean, he was a great worker, and all of a sudden it went to hell, and nobody knew why.
Wow.
So,
wow, that's awesome. Well, thank you very much again for being a part of this. We really appreciate it, and hopefully we can have you guys come back maybe in a year or two.
Love to.
We'll see. But would love that. So thank you very much.
Thank you, Danielle. Thanks, Austin.
Thanks,
All
Austin.
right. Thank you for listening.